Welcome to the Human Design Profiles and Entrepreneurship podcast. I'm your host, Chantel, a 1-3 manifesting generator, small business strategist, workshop facilitator, and the author of the Aligned Action series of workbooks for solo entrepreneurs. Thanks for joining us on this podcast. This is my active learning experiment, all about how we experience entrepreneurship on an individual level, while we're also satisfying our desire for self-awareness. Each episode is a profile of a human design enthusiast / business owner who's here to share how their personal profile lines influence their business journey. Today, I'm connecting with Jess, an experienced reflexologist who expertly weaves other wellness modalities into her practice. She is especially passionate about human design. Jess impacts her clients in the most gently powerful way, offering generous insights into their potential, taking them on a journey through the lens of building on one's unique gifts and strengths. One of her clients shared that Jess is something special. She takes in the whole picture, person, vibes, everything. It's never going to be just about the feet and nothing else. She skillfully layered her intuitive insights with a practical sense of what my body needed. Have a listen while today's guest, Jess, a 2-5, shares her story while you read between the lines. Jess, you have been aware of human design for about 3 years. Tell me about how your understanding of your profile has grown over that time.
Yeah, it's grown hugely. In fact, when you say how it's grown, it's really interesting because I kind of feel it's almost been like a shrinking. When you find out you're a 2-5, it suddenly gives you this massive permission slip to be like, oh, thank God. Or maybe I can just retreat a bit. I'm a funny 2-5 in that I'm quite, people always think I'm an extrovert. They're really surprised if they find out that I love alone time. I love, if I could spend 90% of my time alone, I really would. And especially when you combine that with being a manifester, like I totally get that whole need to kind of close off from everyone else. So yeah, when I found out that I was a 2-5, I think I probably connected with the 2 so much quicker than the 5. The 5 kind of troubled me for a while. I'm sure we'll get to the 5.
Yep.
But yeah, also that was really weird timing for me because I came to human design strangely through the gene keys. Most people evolve into the gene keys. I actually came backwards. I'd come to human design like a few years before 2020. I mean, I came to human design 2019, but I'd say 2020 is when I had time to really dive into it. And so finding out you're a 2 and you're in the middle of a lockdown, which quite honestly, I was enjoying. And it was like such a beautiful break from socialization that, yeah, I think for that reason, the 2 was easy to incorporate into my life from the get-go.
That makes a lot of sense that a 2-line would have that experience of the lockdown. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I get it now that you say it.
Yeah, I think a lot of us enjoyed that pressure taken off.
So would you say that your growth in understanding the 2-5 and how it applies to you is maybe integrating that 5 side a little more? Do you feel like that's happened over the 3 years?
Yeah, the 5's not been a comfortable one for me. The 5 comes with, I feel like you have to give yourself grace with 5.
I was going to say, you mentioned you have a beautiful experience and expression of your 5 line. I'll read to you what you said in your form. It was
please
lovely.
do. Yeah. Okay.
You said, I love to be the calm in the storm, holding people in the midst of emotional upheaval and really offer a space to feel and express what needs to come through.
Oh, yeah. So the 5, I've always been that calm in the storm and seeing things from like a slightly different angle. I think it was that realizing I don't have to perform or I don't have to be that all the time. And I think I'd burnt myself out so many times historically through trying to be that savior figure for everybody. But also I think what comes with it when you're seen like that, it's almost like you have to communicate to other people that you are not always on and you're not always available. That's what I struggled with. So in some ways, it sounds strange, but I could cope with being a 2 and I could verbalize that to people around me. It was like I could articulate that need for alone time for me. It was harder to articulate that I couldn't help everybody in every situation all the time. That I found really, and I'm still finding that hard.
Right.
And this year especially, I've really been integrating it. So 3 years on, I realized that I was really holding myself back in business because I felt that I didn't have that many hours I could give to my reflexology business, because quite honestly, I was being such an amazing friend to too many people. And quite honestly, a couple of friends in particular, I had to say goodbye to this year. And these are, these are longtime friends, but realizing that I was always giving, I'm talking like 20 years, 30 years, I was always giving
Right.
way more than I was receiving.
Hmm.
And as a result of, I call one of them in particular a friend divorce, all these incredible growth opportunities in my business have kind of started to open up. So
Fascinating.
yeah, it was a huge test, but it's been lovely.
Yeah. I mean, that's challenging too, though. It's definitely easier when you say, oh, I need alone time. It's more about you. But when you say, I can't help you, it's more about them. And that's
Does that
hard.
make sense? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And also then with the five, I saw this amazing meme the other day, and I think it was something like, you have to get comfortable with being the villain in someone else's
Mm.
story. And I'm like, oh my God, it makes me tingle, that thought of, as a manifestor as well, you had to just be the good girl growing up, because quite frankly, I'm sure I was probably seen as a bit of a powerhouse, but I didn't feel that way. So I followed the rules and I played the good girl. And yeah, it's funny how that's starting to just, I mean, I'm not a bad person, but
Right. I know what you mean.
you know what I mean?
I
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Just,
There's some unlearning, I think, that has to happen. There's so much unlearning in the deconditioning
that's
process in
exactly it.
general, and then also
Mm,
in the growing up process and just embracing who we are. So much of that is a letting go.
true. Yeah. And
Yeah,
letting go is not often a comfortable thing to do. Um,
I agree. I
Brain does
love to
not
hold
like
on
letting go,
tight.
does it? Brain likes comfort. I don't know if your podcast is covering anything astrologically, but I'm like, for an air sign Gemini, my brain is so fast, and I'm a reflexologist. So my
Hmm.
lifelong journey with that has been all about coming into the body and grounding. But I realized for the first half of my life, I was so up here and brain led. So yeah, it takes a lot for me to let go of things and be comfortable in that discomfort.
Right. How would you say that the journey of growing in reflexology has felt for you in terms of the grounding?
So much of where my brain wants to go is like, human design is such a rich tapestry of information, and it's so easy to get caught up in the head.
Mhm.
When I was learning reflexology, even I received reflexology for 10 years before I even studied it. And there was so much to learn. Learning human design over the last 3 years has, for me, been a bit like when I was learning reflexology 12 years ago, because the foot, I mean, we take our feet for granted, guys. Like
Yeah.
the feet have like a quarter of all the bones in the body are in the feet. There are hundreds of muscles, literally hundreds and hundreds of tiny micro muscles. So to learn the anatomy of all of that, I was so up here in my head. And for those first kind of couple of years of learning reflexology, I was again so in the head about it, and almost forgetting the incredible art form that it was to feel somebody's feet and yet be able to feel their entire body system. And likewise, for me to have my feet held and to be manipulated and it have such an incredible effect on my whole body, you can let go. And human design, I feel, is a bit like that. We're also caught up in learning the numbers, the 2, 5, 4, 6, whatever. And we forget that actually, like, most of it just needs to be lived and just needs to be contemplated. I tend to find myself less in books at all now, ever, and just enjoying conversations like this where you start applying how you live to the numbers rather than applying the numbers to how I live. I'm going that way now more than ever.
That's so interesting. You're right. The learning of it is very in the head. As a one line, I still find myself reading all the things and looking for the definitive answer. I have a lot of channels and a lot of definition in my chart. I'm still looking for anyone's thoughts on that. Like, I feel like there has to be something there that I just don't understand, and that in there's some kind of answer, and such a one line thing, right? I'm reaching for that information to save me.
Of
But
course, and that's like a gift in itself as well, isn't it? It's great.
a
We
gift and a
rely on you
curse,
one lines for the
sure.
wisdom.
But you're right, the foot is a beautiful metaphor for that. There's so much under the surface. There's so much just in the
Mm,
feeling and the embodying. And you're right, it's one thing to know all the names of all the bones, but it's another thing to have that experience of connection with a client, even, right?
for sure, for sure.
Hmm.
Every is so different, every personality is so different. And I think that's the lovely thing about the lines as well. There's me saying, yeah, I don't want to read another book about human design, but I'm not a one line and I don't really have many one lines. When we look at the chart as a
Yeah.
whole, I actually have a lot of three lines. So I can probably
Mm-hmm.
bounce with you around with that. But one line's not so much. So again, it's like permission slip for me to, I forget what gate it is. Is it 16 where it's kind of like jack of all trades kind of skills, like you're dipping into lots of different things? I can't remember which gate.
I unfortunately do not know all the gates off by heart either.
Yeah,
There are
no.
62 of them
I
in
know
one.
that's me as well. I gather lots of little bits of information and I pull it and weave it all together. And yeah, sessions with me are very much like that. As my clients know, I'm kind of doing the feet, but sometimes it's appropriate to go very quiet and still, and sometimes it's just more appropriate to bounce ideas and
Yeah.
philosophies, being humanness around.
There's a metaphor in there for the 2-5 profile, really, of being still, the 2 line, and the bouncing things back and forth, which is the 5,
That's
which
so
is
funny. I've
interesting.
never seen it like that. That's gorgeous. Thank you.
That's why I started this show, because I just want to talk about all the ways that it plays out. It's all so much more present than we're aware of. There's a lot under the surface there that's so interesting to uncover.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with a
Mhm.
2-5, I've read this over and over, and it so resonates that there's a person watching a 2-5, you never really know what is under our surface. I always feel like I wear my heart on my sleeve, but I clearly don't. People get mixed messages from me all the time, which is why I realized that my voice is so important for me, to try and use my voice to inform more and more. How I appear is very different probably to how I'm feeling on the inside, and that can change from day to day and whatever. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's a really interesting thing. When I found out Prince William was a 2-5, I was like, yeah, that figures. People expect a lot from you, and there can be a lot under the surface that people just don't see, and that's fine. That's okay, and that can be a gift. I mean, I
Mhm.
can use that to an advantage, I guess, in some ways.
So, what would you say is the twoist thing about you? Let's go to the 2 line on the conscious side.
The truest thing about me, I mean, I love working. I'm a reflexologist. I love that one-on-oneness. That's not really a two thing, but I love the fact that my job, I can be very hidden if I want to be. I can be very alone a lot of the time. In a previous career, I was very forward facing. I was leading teams and involved in groups of people day in, day out for many, many hours. Whereas my day to day life now, I mean, really, if I want to, I tend to work, say, 4-ish clients a day. And that flexes, and I love that flex, but it means that a lot of my day can be just me. And that's
Mhm.
definitely very too.
Yeah. And do you space out the clients so that
Not
there's
necessarily.
take?
No, I've played around with that. I don't necessarily have to space them out. I was just thinking about social media, popped into my head. I have no structural rhythm when it comes to social media, because sometimes I feel like I want to say something, show my face. Other times, no. And so I'm very, very, very organic when it comes to that, for sure. And how
Okay.
much maybe that's more 5-line. Are you about to ask me about 5-line?
I wasn't, but do tell.
No, I'm just thinking, like, I am quite considered with my social media about what I share, and I think I'm becoming more and more considered. I used to just share what was ever was on my mind. I might share bits of my daughter or something in my feed, and now I'm not so much, because I can see as a 5-line, things get taken and perceived really quite skewed sometimes. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm probably being more considered.
Yeah. I think we're all in a collective journey to shifting our interaction with social media for sure.
Mm.
But you're right. The entire thing is a game of perception.
Mm.
And it feels like no one is winning, whether you're a 5-line or whatever your profile is. You're either being perceived or you're doing the perceiving.
Yeah,
Truly. That's what it's
yeah.
all about, which I think is what we're beginning to awaken to, that, hey, maybe we don't want to be doing that all the time. Maybe we don't want to be either in that position of being judged or doing the judging.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it's an interesting layer.
yeah, for sure.
Have you played around too with the types of clients that you work with, or has that been something that's been fairly static?
That's an interesting one. So I've been practicing for 12 years. I'd say probably more like 5 years in terms of like my daughter going to school, and so me taking up more of a practice. But this was the first year where I considered saying no men. I don't know if that was a 5-line thing, like, or I don't quite know what it was about. I suddenly realized last year I was attracting a few men, nothing untoward, nothing, but I just realized that a certain man was sort of coming very regularly, and I just, I don't know, I was getting funny feelings. And
Mhm.
yeah, does that make sense? I don't know if that's really related, but
Yeah, I might mess up the language on this, so tell me if I'm wrong,
mm,
but the manifestors have it's a repelling aura, is that right?
yeah,
Yeah. And that to me sounds like that really expressing itself, where you're going,
yeah,
that energy is not what I need in
yeah,
my space
that's,
right now.
oh yeah. Yeah, I feel that a lot. And I do feel like I'm having to really honor that because
Mhm.
I've always had it, but it's like you just go along with the world as everyone is, being that polite
Right.
person. And no, everyone has access to me. That's fine. That's what it is to be a good person. And more, I'm really starting to close off the access points. Yeah, which somehow feels very 2-5, but
As you close doors, as you start to say no, how is that changing how you experience yourself in business?
I feel more empowered for sure.
Mhm.
I feel more confident. I feel because it kind of reassures me that by saying no in some areas, it's not like I'm shutting down. It's almost like it's making me more potent, and it's making me more
Mm.
able to, I don't know if I've had more time or space, but just to get clearer from what I am looking for and what I want to do. Like retreats seemed like a distant hope years ago, and now it's like, oh, I do them. I like, I'm a reflexologist, but I don't think we've really mentioned this, but I've got really into barefoot walking
Oh,
a
interesting.
few years ago. So and barefoot shoes. I don't Do you know anything about barefoot
I've
shoes?
heard of
So
them, yeah. I had a little three-line stint as a runner years ago.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So most people come to barefoot shoes through running because they've
Mhm.
become like this big thing. And my husband kind of got into them. So it was about 5 years ago. We both bought our first pair of barefoot shoes. He didn't really get on so well with them for the running, but for me, I was just hooked from the get-go. And so I completely fully transitioned into these barefoot shoes. Like my back stopped hurting, like all these weird like niggly pains. My legs got so much stronger, and like totally won me over. I remember that was the first proper experiment I ever did with human design, was in regards to this kind of outdoor hillside spa place near where I live opened up, and they were rewilding a golf course, and they'd created this like 1 kilometer long barefoot sensory trail.
Oh,
And I was like, oh my God, I want to be involved in this. I think it was 2020. Was it 2021? I don't know, maybe it was 20. And I was like, right, you've got to do this as a manifestor. You have to initiate. Like, let's just go for it. And
right.
it was incredible. The permission slip there was just phenomenal. I just put myself forwards to the owners and said what I do and what I was passionate about, and if they wanted my help. And it was crazy. Like they invited me over like 2 days later, and we did loads of consultation. And then I ended up hosting barefoot walks there for months and months. It was meant to be like a one-off thing, and then I was there like every week, and just people kept coming. And yeah, we hosted retreats there, and then that rolled into me like going to do residential retreats and sort of filtering in that kind of barefoot walking stuff in with offering reflexology treatments while I was on retreat, which was perfect. It's like a perfect combination. So yeah, saying no in some areas, it kind of shifts you into knowing where you do want to go. And as a manifester, I guess, everyone wants to be a manifester. It is scary to be a manifester.
I
It's
do
like
not want to be a
so,
manifester.
no.
I don't mean it in a negative way. It feels a little bit to me like a ride at an amusement park that you cannot get off of. And that's scary to me.
Oh, the validation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
very many manifestors, and I truly haven't worked with very many either. I tend to work with a lot of projector and manifesting generator and generator clients. But the few manifestors I do know slash observe,
Mhm.
I'm always in awe of that energy, but I also would not want it myself. I don't have access to what
Mhm.
it really feels like, I guess.
I love your honesty. It's funny because I have a 10-year-old and she's brilliant. She has some anxiety and she finds some things really hard to do. And so my husband and I find ourselves, we're trying to teach her to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable.
Mm,
And just recently, I've been totally thinking that that is life as a manifestor. If you want to really,
right.
truly live life as a manifestor, I have to just, and this is going to definitely take me beyond my 7 years of deconditioning. I just have to keep getting comfortable in the uncomfortable over and over and over. And maybe that's more quite a 5-line thing as well, but from being a manifestor. That is why I did not resonate with human design in the first place. When I first read my chart before I got into Gene Keys, I was like, nah, 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 nah. You know, these impactful people, like it just, oh, and also I should mention in 2020, I did a lot of online hypnosis. So I was learning some techniques to combine reflexology with hypnotherapy.
Mm.
And as part of that process, I had some hypnotherapy for myself. And one of the things that I was working through was the voice, because part of the thing that I did not resonate with being a manifester was the strong voice and using voice. I would never have done a podcast. Oh my goodness, no, like 3, 4 years ago. I was quiet as a mouse, didn't like to really speak. And now you can't keep me quiet a lot of the time. Like, I can feel the power that's in here. I'm like, this is amazing.
Right.
But yeah, that was very uncomfortable energy before. So I'm hoping that more of my manifestness will just slowly start to feel comfortable. The other reframe that I love with a few manifestors that I've got to know is that we're not, I used to see impacting as like domineering and
Power over instead of
yeah,
power with. Yeah.
yeah. And I see the peace kind of side of manifestors. I think that part of being a manifester, I mean, that's when, yeah, I'm probably such a more peaceful person now that I've got to grips with human design. I see that's sort of more my true nature.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and it sounds
yeah.
like your journey too has been making peace with yourself and
Mm,
then finding peace in some of that hermit time, that alone time, and then also impacting others by helping them create peace, right?
yeah.
Like that seems to be the theme that I'm noticing anyways as you speak.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so you talked about how there's all of these exciting possibilities that come up as a result of distilling down. And I think what I'm
Mm,
hearing from you is if people are listening and they can't see it, like you've made the visual even of compression and the energy feels like a distillation. That's the word that comes to mind. In distilling, all of these possibilities have opened up, and in your chart, you have the view of possibility. So, tell me your interpretation of that. We haven't talked a lot about view on the show, so I'm intrigued to hear what your thoughts are on that.
yeah. So I think also it goes with my right brainness. My two top arrows are right facing. The transference of possibility is probability. And my husband is probability view.
Ah,
So it's been such an interesting one to grasp and to live with. And I realized he's a very like ambition, goal driven person naturally. And so for years, in my old career, it was all about goal and like where you wanted to get to. Part of me just felt like such a hippy drippy person being a reflexologist. Like oh my goodness, the bad time I gave myself. And now that I
oh,
realize I'm possibility view,
mhm.
it's like I just don't worry about the future anymore. And that sounds mad. And to people with probability, that's a horrible thing to hear. It's really unnerving. But to me, I like if I know what's happening next year, I start to feel very confined
Mm,
and like boxed in. I actually am really comfortable, but also, I'm 42. I've had many years of building up my trust muscle,
mhm.
of being able to reflect back and realize that even when I was at my poorest, or, when money wasn't maybe coming in, I'm so clever at like penny pinching. And so I have this luxury of, you know, realizing how resilient I am, that I don't worry about the future. And actually, by not worrying, not by being flippant about it, because I think we're getting a lot of mixed messaging in the wellness and spiritual industry at the moment, just like sit back, chill, don't worry.
Right.
It's like, no, 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 no. Let's reframe that to like take full responsibility, but let's not hem ourselves in and put too many boxes in place, especially if you have possibility view.
Mm,
Leave that to the guys with the probability view that need to be a little bit more structured.
right. I have possibility view as well.
Mm,
And I'm so grateful to have heard your interpretation of it because
mhm,
I'd never thought about it that way. I also hate to close doors, reduce the number of paths. I like to keep things open too. And I always thought of that as being more my either my three line or my being a manifesting generator. But I had
mhm,
not thought about it in that sense. I just had a conversation with my partner where, like, my life before having met him was so much more open in the sense that I could pursue a larger range of possibilities. But with him, I mean, we've got like a house rather than an apartment, and he has 3 children. And so we're tied to this place. And like, to the extent that we're looking for a home, and what we're looking for is nearly impossible because the constraints are so like there's no room for possibility within it because the constraints are so sticky. And I struggle with that. Like, as much as that's a conscious yes, it's a continual yes for me. It's also an acknowledgement of a closing off of a range of possibilities, which I find very challenging.
To like let a little space in for some magic,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I mean, we were chatting before, so I know you're a Sagittarius sun, but I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh man, to hold back a Sagittarius is like, no, there'll be cracks in there somewhere for some miracles to come in. Yeah.
Right.
And
I
it's
think I've
just,
heard people call them glimmers. Uh,
yes,
yeah.
I've heard that recently. And again, that's taking self-responsibility. If you're going to close your mind, if you're going to start feeling constricted, then likelihood is, you're not going to see the glimmers.
Mhm.
This somehow it's up to us to retain that optimism, and whether that's, I don't know what you want to look at it. This is why I have to get out in nature every day. I need to go and see that there's a world outside. Yes, I'm a hermit, and yes, I like to keep to myself, but I have to see big skies. I have to see
Mhm.
trees and just, yeah, look for the light shining.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have that in common. I hadn't linked that to possibility view either, but I too like to just get out and walk, and preferably a different route every day.
Oh,
I'm
100%. Yeah.
looking for the new always. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, oh, well, I've gone this route, but I've never gone in this direction before.
Adventure, Sagittarius, you're going to love
Adventure.
adventure. Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and think people always like misread that. So I have a Sagittarius moon, as we said, and I used to think I needed to travel, I needed to go big. When I was young, I did a lot of that. But I live in the UK. The weather's always different. The sky's always changing. Something is always
Mm.
different. I saw a double rainbow this morning out of my window,
Oh,
and I'm just like,
beautiful.
oh, I'm set for the day.
Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
magical.
Yeah. And this is going back to possibility. I think in a world that we're currently living in, I don't get a sense of probability at all. I mean,
Mm.
things we know are going to be shifting massively in the next couple of years. And that's not in a necessarily scary way. It's just, it's going to be a change of life that we can't even imagine right now. Like we couldn't imagine lockdown. And we're
Mhm.
blessed and privileged enough that lockdown didn't affect us in a terribly scary way, but it did change our
Mhm.
life completely. You couldn't predict the way your business is going to run for the next 3 years. No
Mhm.
way right now.
Yeah. So then what does goal setting look like for you?
I do. I set intentions. I guess I have like loose goals. So for me, I know I want to host a residential retreat next year, and I roughly know where I want it to be. But in terms of like size, I'm not setting any expectation there. Yeah. So there's goals, but there's ways of making them loose.
Yeah,
Mm.
I love that. Well, I hope that all those possibilities are beautiful for you in the next year. We'll close the episode with our cards. I'm holding the custom human design cards that are made by Christina from Glow Glow Juice HD. And you and I will take a deep breath in together and then release that. And the card that I've pulled for you today says, I trust my natural gifts and talents. Do I recognize what comes naturally to me as a valuable asset?
Mm. Oh, I was poor 2 lines. No. My husband, I was getting nervous about something the other day, which actually, like, today, I said to you before, I just had a good feeling about this podcast. I wasn't nervous about it, but I was nervous about something the other day that I had to go do. And my husband just held my hand and he said, have you got your brain with you? I was like, yes. He's like, you're more than ready. I'm like, okay.
Oh, that's such a nice
Yeah.
reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if anyone is interested in a residential retreat or reflexology or any of the other amazing things that you mentioned, where should they come find you?
Well, you could find me on Instagram. I'm at jess.trent.co. I also have my own website, which is jesstrent.co.uk. I'm here in the UK. And yeah, that's about it for now.